Welcome back. This is Sunday edition. So it was a momentous week for one Miguna Miguna, the self-declared NRM general who was arrested on Friday last week. The week before that, of course, before being held for 5 days, according to his lawyers, incommunicado. Nobody knew where he was. According to himself, he was moved from one police station to another, saying he was not in very humane conditions. That was before he was put on a KLM flight back to Canada via Amsterdam. So a lot has been said about this. We'll try to get what Miguna has said about this. Let's listen into what Raila Odinga had to say about Miguna's arrest and deportation back to Canada.
Wanajuzi wanashika Mkenya kwa ndege na kurusha kupeleka kule Canada. Na huyu Mkenya amezaliwa hapa Hero, Kenya hii. Watu wa Hero wakilalamika wanakwenda wanapiga watu risasi. Watu 3. Pamoja na mtoto wa miaka 17 ambaye alikuwa anakwenda kulipa karo kwa shule. Anapigwa risasi na wao. Hiyo ni serikali gani? Sio ni unyama. Kwingine watu wakifanya maandamano wanarusha tear gas. Eneo zingine watu wakifanya maandamano bunduki. Na nchi ni moja. Sio ni ubaguzi. Hatuwezi kuishi nchi pale ambaye watu hawana thamani kwa maisha ya binadamu. Kama serikali haiwezi kuheshimu maisha ya binadamu, hiyo sio serikali.
There has been a lot of reactions on this, and especially questions or queries about Miguna Miguna's citizenship. Of course, Kenyan by birth, and he has held a Canadian passport for many years. The Interior Ministry did say that indeed Miguna did renounce his Kenyan citizenship. Of course, Miguna did refute that. Let's listen to what he had to say on landing in Canada.
The Constitution is very clear. You cannot cancel, you cannot invalidate citizenship by birth. So I'm a citizen by birth. I never renounce my citizenship. I would never do it. Even if I was crazy, I would never do it. And I never did. And luckily, Canada does not require anybody to renounce citizenship before you pick the passport. And remember, I didn't have a Kenyan passport when I traveled to Canada. They had withdrawn my passport in 1987. So where did they expect me to be and how? So I needed a passport, right? So I'm entitled to a passport. The Constitution says I can come and go as I wish. If you're a citizen, and they're trying to restrict my movement, they're trying to restrict my political activities, they're trying to restrict my beliefs, thoughts, and association. And I've said no.
That was Miguna Miguna on arrival in Toronto, Canada. The question we're seeking to try and answer, gentlemen, is was he deported or exiled? KTN News broke that story at around 10 p.m. And I went to the Jomo Kenyatta International Airport to try and see if I could find out what was happening. And there was nothing. There was no trace of, there was no presence of any security officers or government officers or sign of Miguna or his lawyers or any of the NASA leadership. Nobody saw Miguna get into the KLM flight via Amsterdam to Canada, begging the question. Even people were asking, why were we breaking a fake story? But indeed, it turned out he was on that plane. How would you describe, Dismas, the way in which Miguna was whisked out of the country?
Well, there are two ways. When you go through Article 39, 12, and 16, they say that if you're a Kenyan, you can never, ever, your birthright in Kenya as a citizen can never, ever be revoked. Never. And if you go through that Article 39, it says that you are supposed to travel in and out of Kenya at pleasure, so nothing would happen. Now, if you look at that perspective, then it means that, in fact, Miguna Miguna was forced into exile. He was not deported because he's a Kenyan. And I think your channel did a story. They went back to his village, and people said he was born here. They could even point to some locations where they saw him growing up and where he has since relocated and bought a piece of land. So when you go through those articles 39, 12, and 16, it confirms that Miguna Miguna is a Kenyan, that is a trip to Canada would easily be termed as exile. But when you come to the government sources, the information they're giving is that he obtained his second passport through fraud, that the late Kajuang gave instructions which are a bit complicated, so nobody seems to understand. But the best practice would be that because he's a Kenyan, and the High Court had given orders that the government to suspend any criminal proceedings against him till he's presented before the High Court, that's what one would have expected to take place. Because from the affidavit sworn by Mr. Boynet and General Kialanga, there's a confusion as to when Miguna was set free from the police, and when he landed in the hands of the immigration, and when he landed at the airport, and when he landed in Amsterdam. So there's a bit of confusion, and I suspect maybe it's only the Inspector General of Police who knows really what transpired on that particular evening. Because when you broke the news, people were asking questions. Has he been deported? Has he been forced into exile? And those are the two questions that must be answered. But be that as it may, we still go back to the most important issue, is that our court orders are respected. It's very easy to come to the conclusion that they were not respected. Because you had the poor Judge Luka Kimaru at his court waiting for Miguna Miguna. Unknown to him, Miguna Miguna is somewhere on his way to the airport. You know, that really makes the judiciary become a laughing stock. So here is a whole judge of the High Court who's given very firm orders and is at the judiciary waiting to release this chap. And then before he can say his name, the fella is on his way to Amsterdam, really bastardizing the entire judicial process. So I really think that's bad manners.
Wakili, what is your take on this, and especially on the issue of citizenship? The law, we understand, says that he was supposed to apply for another passport, Kenyan passport, under the new Constitution 2010. I don't know what does the law say.
You know, Ben, first of all, I'd like to stay on point.
Yeah.
And stay focused. We need to act in defense of the Constitution of Kenya. As to whether Miguna was deported or exiled, that is a by the way issue, because the fact of the matter remains, there were court orders. He was supposed to be presented before a judge of the High Court. That was not done. So you take him, you whisk him out of the country, and the courts of this country have held previously that even that passport which you are given, it is not a privilege that you're asking the government, oh, please, give me this passport. It's a right. It has certain limitations, yes, but it's a right. Now, as to whether he was deported or exiled, clearly the law, as it now stands, deportation is a process unknown for Kenyan citizens. You cannot deport a Kenyan citizen. You are deporting him to where? He's supposed to be in this country. He has just been forced out of the country, probably exiled, even for non-citizens of this country. So long as there are court proceedings, even if even if you lodge an appeal, you cannot be deported on that basis alone. So we stay on point. Why did the Immigration, Ministry of Interior fail to observe the court orders? That is actually the key. When we go to deportation or exile, we are now
these are side shows.
Yes.
Hesbon, what's your take on this?
I think, fidelity to the law is very important. And the fact that you're talking about deportation or being exiled and running away from the real issue, why is it that a judge sat in a court waiting for Miguna while Miguna was being whisked away, or was whisking himself away? Who are the people who are involved? Because if he exiled himself, the question would be, how can he move from police custody to the airport, process everything, and move away? Who is responsible for that? If he was deported, why is it that the same state agency that is charging Miguna with an illegality is letting him go for free? What informs that kind of a decision? And I think the unfortunate situation that we find ourselves in as Kenyans is it is increasingly becoming a lot more difficult to get to the bottom of anything No one gives you the right information. You look at the contradictory information from the police force and the director of immigration, and you're left wondering, so who exactly is supposed to tell us what actually transpired? You look at the ammunition that Miguna seems to be having outside Kenya, and you also start asking yourself, is it true that the government can actually do this? Because from where I sit, Miguna is a lot more of a threat, you know, to the Jubilee regime in Canada than he was when he was in Kenya. And again, that gives you the impression that there is a lot of gray areas in this, and you cannot for certain say that he was exiled or he was deported. And if anything happened, there must have been someone behind it to portray either side, you know, of these two antagonistic sides of the political divide in bad light. And unfortunately,
yes,
the law is suffering in the process. But what Kenyans need to ask themselves is very simple, that if this is happening to Miguna Miguna, it can actually happen to anyone. And that is why we should be very cautious.
Right, indeed. And it is a story, of course, that we said has been eliciting a lot of reactions. Let's listen into what some of the Jubilee leaders had to say. Here's Kipchumba Murkomen.
Now, he's a Canadian citizen, as we've seen. Therefore, he held dual citizenship. Let's make that argument and accept that he's right by saying he's holding dual citizenship. Why did he not say that during the last elections? Because the Constitution does not allow any person who has dual citizenship to become a candidate. So, meaning he's doomed if he was dual citizen. He's also doomed if he was not.
But also there's no due diligence by the various institutions because they also didn't catch it.
I'm talking about in Miguna as a person. It means he's a conman because he had a duty of care to present himself before IBC and say, look, I have dual citizenship of Kenya and Canada. Since I want to be governor of Nairobi, I'm surrendering my Canadian citizenship and therefore I'll be Kenyan alone. So this has exposed also other issues. And I'm sure the documents that he filed within IBC, he did them on oath. And if he did on oath, there will be another crime that even if you say that he had dual citizenship, this man swore on oath that he's a candidate, qualified to run as a candidate without dual citizenship, yet he needs...
All right, let's pick it up from there where Sophia and Murkomen left it. And Mutinda, what is the true status of Miguna's citizenship? Because like they were raising there, if the government is saying that he renounces citizenship, then how was he cleared to vie for Nairobi governor?
I think we are mixing a lot of issues in this matter. And I think it would be good to separate the issues so that we have clarity about what it is we are talking about. First, there is the issue of his wrongfully acquired passport. Why wrongfully? Because the passport was acquired in 2009, before we passed the new constitution that provided for Kenyans to be allowed to have dual citizenship.
All right.
So by then, he was already a Canadian citizen and he acquired a Kenyan passport, meaning that by then he had a dual citizenship and the law was not allowing that as at that particular time. So that is an issue by itself. Then we come to the issue of being cleared to vie. That again is an issue by itself. And it's some sort of an indictment on our institutions because they needed to have been very thorough to ascertain exactly what is the status, because it is not a secret that this person has been in Canada and he's been a citizen. So I do not know why the IEBC did not go out of its way to verify what the status was at that particular point. Then there is the issue of the court orders. Someone has cast aspersions on the director of immigration, but for me it would be more of the police than the director of immigration, because the court orders were directed at the police and not at the director of immigration. And probably that is something that also needs to be dealt with, because in court there was no court order that was to be served at the office of the director of immigration. The court orders that were there were directed at the CID and at the police. So if there are people who need to answer questions as to why Miguna was not produced in court as per the court orders, then it should be the the police,
All
not
right.
the immigration. The immigration, if there are questions they need to answer, then those should be separate from whatever the police should be answering in terms of contempt of court.
All
Because
right.
I think one of the key issues that comes out here is the issue of the contempt of court, that the court had already pronounced itself on this particular matter, and whatever they had said was not abided by. Those
So
who had been-
we'll talk about the court orders and the contempt of court charges in a short while when we're talking about the charges that Miguna faced in Kajiado. But for now, I wanted to clear the issue about Miguna. From where you sit,
yes.
did Miguna have both passports, or was he a Canadian citizen and not a Kenyan? And is it possible to cancel your citizenship by birth?
No, that one is not. Especially post-2010 constitution, it is a birthright. Citizenship by birth is a birthright. So that simply means that there is no way you're going to cancel it. That any Kenyan who's born within the boundaries of Kenya after 2010 or even before is automatically, forget the formalities, that you become automatically a citizen.
All
so
right.
the only questions that you might raise is about how did he have a passport, a Kenyan passport and a Canadian passport prior to 2010. That would be the only issue surrounding his passport.
All right.
But if, for instance, he had acquired that passport post-2010, I don't see what the issue would be.
All right.
Yes.
Listeners, in your understanding, did Miguna have dual citizenship?
Well, it seems the case that he's got that dual citizenship because he's got the Canadian passport and he's got the Kenyan passport. And even having the Kenyan passport really is not material in this conversation, that in fact he was born in Kenya. So that alone is sufficient. So then the big question is, can you actually deport a Kenyan? Of course, no, it's not possible. And Kavemba has raised fundamental issues around the conduct of the police. And I think that's why we should be spending most of our time asking ourselves, these orders were served on the Inspector General of Police and then on the DCIA, knowing very well that they've got orders from Justice Luka Kimaru. They proceeded to treat them with contempt. Now, there's a valid expectation that the Kenyan police would explain to us so that we understand. Maybe even for benefit of some of us who may be having two passports, so that we know when do you have your Kenyan passport, when do you have your Canadian passport. And I like the way Kipchumba Murkomen has responded to that question. Being a clever man, he has dodged the issue of Miguna's deportation or being forced into exile, and he's raised fundamental issues about the capacity of IBC to conduct free, fair, and credible elections. Because if at the first level you are clearing candidates who are in breach of the Constitution to run for office, then how can we trust you to run a free, fair, credible election? I mean, it was in the public knowledge that Miguna every single day said he's a Canadian citizen, and he was running for a state office. One would have expected then IBC to be more focused on its citizenship and establish that because you've got two passports, then you don't qualify to run for this office.
Right.
And in my view, for the Director of Immigration and the Inspector General of Police, having established that there are questions around his citizenship, when he got the passport, maybe that would have been a better charge to prefer against him instead of these other ones which they lumped together.
Yeah, and that's not to be clear, of course. If he was clear to run for Nairobi governor, the law says that state officers cannot hold a dual citizenship.
Yeah.
So indeed, if what the Interior Ministry is saying is to be believed, that he should be deported back to Canada, if he was elected as Nairobi governor, we would be deporting the Nairobi governor back to Canada.
Which would be a very interesting contradiction. Yeah. And one hopes, and it's very disappointing that one of the nominees to the cabinet, that's Mr. Kiriako Tobiko, was doing investigations around electoral injustices and mischief, and he did not get to establish that as well. Because how would you allow then somebody who is in breach of the Constitution, you allow him to run for this office, and then you let him fly away like a bird?
All right. Wakili, your final thoughts on this?
First of all, some very baffling legal interpretation from senior Murkomen as to, these are factual issues, and in any event, there are issues that ought to be considered before a court of law. We need to determine, the court would have determined whether Miguna indeed has dual citizenship, or whether he is entitled to both at this juncture. But to kind of speculate, I think will not do much good. But the bottom line is, as far as I understand it, Miguna is a citizen of Kenya by birth. As to whether he's a Canadian citizen, I'm also not sure about it. But that's the least I can say.
All right, let's talk about these court orders. From where you sit, Bwana Wakili, what should happen? According to Miguna himself, speaking in Canada, to some of the TV stations there, he said that 5 court orders were defiled by the states when he was being held. What should happen?
I think comply with the court orders. You exiled him. Somebody needs to go to Canada and bring Miguna back, because the order of the court was that present Miguna to a specific court at a specific town. Those orders have not been vacated as we stand now. So we are calling upon the Ministry of Interior, Immigration Department, go to Canada, fetch Miguna, present him in court, charge him for all those things he might have, all those crimes he might have committed.
Right.
And then once the court process is over, you can do what you want to do.
All right, Hesbon, finally, from a communication perspective, many people, many pundits seem to think that there is a government trying to spin to avoid the issues of the court orders and contempt of court, asking why should Miguna, when he was supposed to be presented at the Milimani courts, be taken to Kajiado, more than 100 kilometers away from Nairobi, and then why this deportation / exiled thing rather than just deal with Miguna and what he presents? Is this such a threat? What is the point here by the government?
I think the point by the government is very clear. You know, that in the first place, we have somebody who is not even a Kenyan, who is causing a lot of trouble. You know, trouble to the extent of something that would be tantamount to treason. Mm-hmm. And the projection that the mass public gets, especially those who are ardent followers of Jubilee, is that we are better off with somebody who is causing problems outside Kenya if he is not Kenyan. And I think, you know, having that in the public domain to many people is a lot more difficult, because it is very difficult to comprehend how one can be born in Kenya and not be a Kenyan citizen. I mean, you cannot cease to be a Kenyan citizen if you're born in Kenya. So in my opinion, the technicalities of how he procured the Kenyan passport and all that are all immaterial. And what the government has succeeded in doing, either inadvertently or knowingly, is to project a situation where Miguna is emerging as a hero who is being frustrated by the government for the positions that he has taken. And again, if we come back to the court orders and the whole process of getting Miguna out of the country and what the law says, I think the spirit of the Constitution is very clear that if you're a state officer, you cannot hold dual citizenship, for the simple reason that if you do anything in Kenya on which you're supposed to be culpable, then you have nowhere to run. You'll be held responsible here. But the irony of all this is that we have somebody who has committed a crime here in Kenya according to the state, and it is the same state that is now perceived, you know, to have deported this same individual to another country. And that is the problem I have with the Immigration Department, that if there was a court order ordering the Inspector General of Police to provide Miguna, then the violation of this court order is by the police because they did not provide Miguna. But it has been heightened by the Immigration Department because they ensured that Miguna was not where the court required him. He was at the airport leaving the country.
It's a true conundrum, isn't it? All right, let's leave it there. But, of course, after the break, we'll take this conversation further. And in Kajiado, Miguna was charged with treason. He did not take a plea, saying that he should be presented to the High Court, in Nairobi. A lot has been spoken about the treason charge. That's what we talk about when we come back. It is nothing new in Kenya. We have had people in this country charged with treason. Let's talk about treason when we return.